Welcome back to the Tech Leaders Talk podcast, where experts and leaders in the wide world of IT discuss the industry and hard-earned career wisdom with your host, Barry Newkirk. Today's guest is Raymond Gray. Raymond has spent more than 30 years using his personal and career experiences to help his clients create solutions that support their business needs in systems modernization, systems conversion, and strategic planning. As the son of a retired New York City prison warden, Raymond knows the value of discipline and integrity. While his focus is on computer technology, he also provides business consulting services for process improvement and governance. Raymond received his education at the Darla Moore School of Business at the University of South Carolina and holds BS degrees in management and management science. He is currently a consultant in Columbia, South Carolina, where he lives with his wife and children.
So we're very happy to welcome Raymond Gray, a great friend, collaborator, and colleague to our podcast. So we're very happy to have you today, Raymond, on Tech Leaders Talk. So welcome.
Thank you, Barry. Always good to be able to sit down and talk to you, man.
And so let's just start at the beginning. Tell us how you grew up, how you got started in tech. What was the start of your journey?
I was born and raised in New York City, true city kid. So my first introduction to tech would probably be the standard video game scenario way back in the day. And I took my first programming class as a senior in high school and absolutely fell in love with it. Always been a logical kind of person. And so that kind of fit me to the T. So I figured once I determined that I did want to go to college, I figured that was the route for me. So that's how I kind of got interested in technology in the first place.
So you mentioned video games. So my favorite video game is not Pac-Man, but it was like Phoenix, where you shoot the little alien ships out of the thing. What was your favorite video game?
I was killer in Miss Pac-Man. Love Miss Pac-Man.
So you graduated high school in what year? Just to make sure I'm tracking with you.
Okay, so I graduated high school in 1982 and immediately came down to University of South Carolina to become a Gamecock.
So you said you took a programming class in high school?
Yes.
That is shocking to me.
Data cards and everything. Well, I told you I'm from New York.
Yeah. Well, I went to school, as you know, in South Carolina. We didn't have that. Well, we didn't have that at the high school that I went to. Did you want to take that class? I'm curious about the genesis point of that. Was that just a easy class to take as a senior?
No, it was, I don't know exactly how I gravitated to that class. I just know that once I got in it, it was really, really an eye-opening experience for me. So I'm not quite sure if that was part of my senior requirements or my counselor steered me towards that class.
That's interesting.
Whatever the case is, I'm glad I ended up in that class.
So you left New York, came to South Carolina, University of South Carolina, go Gamecocks. Did you get an IT degree from USC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, dual degree, management science. And so management science is basically computer science without the math, without all the math. And so I got the dual degree management. So it's from the business school.
Awesome.
So it's a computer science degree through the business school, basically.
And how did you pick USC? I mean, you're from New York City. There's, a zillion great higher education academic opportunities up there with amazing colleges and universities. How did you pick University of South Carolina?
Well, a couple different things. So I'm a big Mets fan, and the Mets had a player by the name of Mookie Wilson who had gone to the University of South Carolina in the 70s. So I knew they had a great baseball program. I was a former baseball player in my younger days, so that was one of the reasons. And then my uncle lived down on Johns Island, and he had tried to get me to come down for college, and he pointed me towards Citadel and the University of South Carolina. So anybody who knows anything about me knows that my mother was a prison warden, and the last thing I needed was more discipline. So that immediately ruled out the Citadel.
So you went to USC. Tell us what kind of work you do now.
So currently I am doing some work for the Department of Health and Environmental Control. I am their chief, I guess you would say, technical lead with regards to dynamics. So we're just developing all kind of cool apps for the state of South Carolina. We just released a hurricane management app. My team has overview of the two COVID apps that are running for the state. We're in the process of developing some more cool internal apps. So right now I'm doing a lot more tech lead stuff, tech management stuff, as opposed to the project management and program management that I've done over the past 10 to 15 years.
And your team today at DHEC is pretty wide ranging. You have folks all over the country, is that right?
Correct. There's only 3 of us here in South Carolina. I have a couple of folks up in Jersey. I have a gentleman out in California. I have another gentleman in Dallas. So we are a dispersed team.
As part of your background, I mean, you and I met when you were CIO for a state agency. Tell us a couple of the places that you've been as CIO or IT leadership, Raymond.
Primarily, I've worked at Department of Revenue. I've been at as full time. Those are my two full time positions. Would be at the Department of Revenue and the Department of Juvenile Justice, where you and I both met.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else has been on a contract basis.
And you were also CIO for the golf course network, right?
Yes, that was an awesome project, Barry.
That was fun. So what I want to tease out there for the listener is that Raymond doesn't hold the title of CIO now, but he's had 3 different stints as a chief information officer for various organizations, and which we will get into in a few minutes, is the pivot point of the kind of work you're doing now, which is taking all that experience and then offering that as an additive to DHEC and your other clients. So let's switch for a moment into a different gear, Raymond. Who were your mentors as you were coming up?
Obviously, my primary one would be my mother. She's very influential on my thought process and things that are important to me. Being an athlete, obviously, some of the coaches that I've played for over the years have stepped in that gap as well. And I think professionally, it was a gentleman who brought me into the Department of Juvenile Justice, who probably had the most to do with my leadership style and my leadership abilities. He really helped cultivate those for me. And his name's Otha Dillahay.
Yeah, Mr. Dillahay. Yeah, I remember him. You mentioned your mom. Talk to us about your mom a little bit. Paint that picture for us and why she had such an impact on you.
Well, my mom, this classic single parent story. It was my sister, my mother, and myself. So, the 3 amigos. We were very, very tight as a family unit. And, growing up in the Bronx, which is not the best borough to grow up in. I didn't grow up in what you would call a hellhole, but, I did see and experience things that probably, young kids shouldn't. So again, having a mother who was, she worked her way out of poverty and, obviously wanted better for my sister and myself. So she worked for the city of New York. She was, like I said, she worked in the prison system, and she had, risen up the ranks to become the first female warden of a men's prison, which, was
wow,
an accomplishment at the time. And
that's amazing.
So she was very influential. She was very no nonsense. She wanted to make sure that my life was better than hers and that I was able to, get to places that she maybe didn't get to.
I think that's a great picture of what every parent wants for their kids is, hey, I want, regardless of where we are, I want you to have better than I had and more options and choices and those kind of things. So kudos to her. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
She's the quintessential push you forward mom.
I see some of that in you for sure. So let's go back to your, so you left USC, if I got this right, and you went to Department of Revenue in South Carolina there in Columbia as a programmer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So tell us about a transition or a pivot point that moved you into leadership from being an individual hands-on contributor into the leadership space.
As you know, the better you do, the more you get to do, so to speak. And so, I was pretty good developer, programmer, whatever. And, I kept moving along and, responsibilities grew. And so I got to be the lead programmer and, that type of thing, and just started moving up the ranks. And then I found myself at a, local insurance company and felt like I had kind of maxed out my ability to climb. Mm-hmm. So I was probably, step below middle management and kind of bumping my head against the ceiling, so to speak. And had a fateful meeting with Otha Dillahay. Just happened to meet him out on the golf course, and we got to talking, and he asked me what I did, and I told him, and he was like, "Oh, well, I'm deputy over at Department of Juvenile Justice, and I'm looking for an IT director or CIO." And I was like, "Well, that's not really something because at that point I still was really, really close to the technology, and that is my true love. So I do like the actual nuts and bolts of the technology, but he helped me expand my horizons and made me think differently. So I went to talk to him, and I interviewed with him and the director for the position, and they saw something in me that maybe I didn't see myself. That was a turning point for me, because I feel like that took me out of the very small thinking that maybe I was in, and gave me a much grander view of business, technology, and most importantly, people.
That's quite a jump to go from a hands-on programmer, probably a senior developer, to IT director, CIO. Did you understand that was a big jump at that point in time, or did you just roll with it?
I didn't understand the true nature of the jump, because while in my previous engagements, I did have access to higher levels of management, and I did, speak and give, I guess, reports and statuses to those type of folks. I didn't understand the true nature of having to have a whole department under me and to make department decisions and budgetary mm-hmm. decisions and those type of things.
Do you remember how many folks were reporting to you when you became the IT director at South Carolina Juvenile Justice?
Yeah. Well, it was a small department. It was less than 20. It was probably between 15 and 20 folks.
Yeah.
And then while I was there, it grew some more. So probably by the time I left, it was about 25 folks.
One of the themes that we find in talking to leaders across the country, Raymond, doing this podcast, is the theme of relationship and proximity.
Yes.
Is, having a relationship, being able to create a relationship with somebody, but also being in the right place at the right time, for lack of a better term, is something that we hear every time pretty much that we do this podcast. So you left state government and went to T-Links down in Myrtle Beach, and that was your first foray as a private sector CIO, IT leader. Can you explain kind of the situation that you walked into and the larger project that was at hand there?
So T-Links is an organization that they tie business units together. So just to give you a quick overview. So the hotel industry, the golf packaging industry, and the golf course industry all work together to provide, obviously, golf to the Myrtle Beach and greater area. So what this project was they had some ancient technology. I think they were running off a mainframe that was, 25, 30 years old. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to be more flexible and scalable. And they wanted to move into being able to offer some things on the web. So they brought me in to kind of oversee this rebuild. When I first got there, they were housed in a old Air Force base building down in the South Myrtle Beach area, not very far from the beach. They had a couple of servers sitting behind, I don't know what you would call it, bifold walls. And it wasn't even real walls. The room wasn't air conditioned. It wasn't, didn't have the standard server room setup. They had a couple of machines that they backed up, and, they had a former employee who lived up in Pittsburgh, and they had a backup server in her garage in Pittsburgh. And for the amount of money that they ran through the system, it was not the type of setup that you would imagine. They needed it to go to the next level. So I came in, I was charged with bringing in a team to help develop this new modern scalable system that would be usable throughout the country, because they had not just Myrtle Beach area, they had the Ocean City, Maryland area, they had Biloxi, Mississippi, they had Atlantic City, New Jersey, they had a few courses in the Bahamas, they had some courses down in Hilton Head, Charleston. So it was the Grand Strand Tea Time network. However, it encompassed more than just the Myrtle Beach proper area.
My understanding from that, I don't know if this is correct, but I think I've been told that that piece of software in that organization sold that piece of software, and I think part of that is used for the golfers out there, is used in the Golf Now application. That's what I've been told. That
is correct. They maybe a year or so after I completed that project, they sold it to some big national company. Mm-hmm. And so that's also a proud point for me.
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing project all the way around.
The more I got involved, the more I learned, and I developed additional skills, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I think out of that environment came a lot of who I am today in terms of being able to deal with people. I had some pre-existing relationships that predated me there, that I had to navigate. And truth be told, I didn't always navigate those relationships as well as I should have. That was a teaching point for me. That's kind of how I am. I'm always looking to better myself. And, I'm not one of those individuals who think that, I got it all figured out all the time, and no one has anything of value to add to my story. I think that was a big turning point for me. It gave me a lot more confidence in my ability, because again, that was pretty much my second real tech leadership position. And it was my first private sector rather. When you work in the public sector, you always say, it's this, but it's public sector. And sometimes there's not the value added to what a public sector job is. And so you still want to gauge yourself in the private sector. Mm-hmm. And so that was my first private sector leadership position. And so it did come with some trepidation.
Let me go back to a couple of value questions. What is something when you were a younger professional, Raymond, that you undervalued, that you value very highly today?
Soft skills. As a young person, I just thought if I was smarter than everybody else and could do the work, faster than everybody else, then that was all I needed. I didn't really have the soft skills and the personality, because again, you have to remember, I'm coming from New York City, so that's a whole different attitude, even in the workplace. And so I carried over some of those New York traits in terms of my ability to work with others, and I hear one thing and somebody says something, and then it means something else to me in terms of how I respond. And so I didn't value the ability to speak to people. I didn't value it as much as I do now.
Let's flip that coin. What is something that you overvalued younger in your career that you don't think is as important today as you thought it was maybe in your 20s?
So for whatever reason, as a young developer, speed was that was my thing. I wanted to be the first one in class who finished the assignment. I wanted to be the first one at work who finished. I was much more focused on speed. And now, I've realized obviously that measure twice and cut once.
That's very valuable in the IT world. That's very valuable. Looking back over the arc of your career, Raymond, what would you say is your proudest professional accomplishment?
The Tea Time one would be a close second, but my proudest would be the Scooby project. That was a very, very large project, very high dollar project. I was the program manager for that. So the Department of Labor gave the state of South Carolina, state of North Carolina, and the state of Georgia $50 million to rewrite their unemployment insurance benefit systems. They wanted a single system that served 3 states. Essentially what they were trying to do is get out of having to give every state $10 to $20 million to replace their system.
Right.
So they wanted a base system that could then be taken from those three states and used in other states when other states needed to do modernizations. So that was, and if you can imagine what I just said, I dealt very, very closely with government in 3 different states. Although they are very close regionally, they are very different in culture and I guess ways of doing things. Right. So I reported, as the program person, I reported to all 3 states. I had to discern what information was consortium information versus, individual state information. And so I had to walk a lot of fine lines in that process, and always had to keep 2 out of the 3 happy, because that was the only way I could get fired, right? Is you got to keep 2 of the 3 happy. Again, it really sharpened a lot of different skills for me. It introduced me to some really good people. Since I've been in leadership, obviously I'm used to dealing with alpha personalities. Mm-hmm. And so, you got alpha personalities spread across 3 different states, all seeking the same goal, trying to spend money out of the same pot, and then having to answer also to DOL for the work that was being done. So that's my most proud. That's the proudest accomplishment, because we were able to deploy South Carolina in, I guess it was 2017. We deployed North Carolina 2019, and we never did get to finish Georgia. They backed out, so they had some internal things on their side that they needed to leave the project for. But we put in a very good, solid, scalable, modern system in 2 states that allowed people to get paid on time, and it cut down on fraud. And again, that was one of those situations where it wasn't just about making money. Mm-hmm. The project itself served the greater good for those 2 states. And if you can imagine, people waiting 13, 14, 15 weeks for an unemployment check, mm-hmm. and not having that be an issue anymore, because there's a modern system that allows them to do their initial filing and get a check, in a much more expedited time frame. So that was, in addition to the professional things that it did for me, it mm-hmm. also helped folks in South Carolina and North Carolina, especially with the pandemic.
Yeah, I was going to say, absolutely. I mean, the timing of that was amazing.
It was.
Yeah.
So those 2 states had really no issues with paying people, getting people their COVID money. There was not any additional coding needed to be able to get people paid. And so, yeah,
that's cool, man. people from the private sector coming into the public sector, they're not used to the understanding the impact sometimes of what their technology can do. And so when we're talking to somebody about child support, well, my parents were divorced, and so I was a child that my mom got child support. But we have a lot of folks who work on the child support system, and you affect these hundreds of thousands, millions of lives. We have folks that work on unemployment insurance. Even to this day, we have people who work on that kind of thing, who touch thousands of people every week in some fashion, and Medicaid and Medicare and SNAP and TANF benefits and all those kind of things. And it's this huge mission mindset. And a lot of times, particularly in big corporations, you have the same kind of impact, but in government, you can touch people that are just everyday folks, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And to your point, just real quickly, I had a conversation with, so we had a vendor who was building out the system. Mm-hmm. And, we were having problems with one of the states, and he was like, oh my God, these people, da, da, da. And so I had a little sidebar with him, and I said, listen, let me give you some context here. I said, your company is $1 billion company. You're used to throwing systems in every 2-3 years, and then you're on to the next. I said, well, these folks are replacing 20 and 30-year-old systems. So for the next 20 and 30 years, they're going to be using this system that you throw in and that you're on to the next. I said, so you have to understand, they're going to want what they want, because this is their one chance, their one bite at the apple. And state government doesn't get capital funds like this to be able to rebuild systems. So when you're talking to somebody about what they need, you're thinking they're talking about what they want, and they're trying to tell you what they need for the next 30 years because they don't have an opportunity to get another chunk of money to replace this system. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of people who I worked with on that project, they were at varying degrees or varying stages of their careers. So, you had some 20 plus year state government folks who were going to be sunsetting pretty soon. And then you had some new state folks, state employees who were going to be there with this system and watch this system for the next 20 years. And so that's, as a service provider, you always have to put yourself in the other person's shoes, because I put in systems and then I don't really think about them because now I got another system that I got to put in, or I got another thing that I have to do. And this is their thing to do. Yeah. And, if you don't look at it from their perspective, it's easy to get frustrated with, well, why are they asking me about this? And why are they taking too much time with that? And it's screwing up my timelines and my, those type of things. But you really have to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, that perspective is huge. Let me ask you a question that I wasn't planning on, but just dawned on me while we were talking. So you started as a programmer, got into leadership. Do you think your time and your initial training and experience as a programmer helps you as an IT leader?
Absolutely. Again, being a developer requires a type of mindset, but you can't, it's just another skill or another tool in the toolbox. So when I'm sitting in a development meeting and I'm listening to folks talk about things and I got a clear understanding of what they're talking about. Or when somebody tells me, hey, this is going to take me 3 weeks to do this. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not, maybe I haven't developed in X number of years, but it doesn't take you that long to do this. So I've been able to have, real conversations with technical folks, as well as, and I like to consider myself a hybrid kind of executive, because, as I was coming up, there's kind of two schools, right? So there was the person who was super techie and couldn't talk to people. And there was the other school where the people, I could talk to you all day long, but I can't tell you anything. So I like to consider myself kind of a hybrid, because I do speak to development people on their level. And then I'm also able to put together presentations and have conversations with folks who are not necessarily technical folks, and make them understand in layman's terms what it is, what issues, challenges, or whatever we're facing, and what we need from them in order to overcome those.
Yeah, I think one of your superpowers is being able to talk to different people from different backgrounds and make them help them to understand where things are. I've seen you do that in multitudes of ways, whether it's the boardroom or in a cube with developers, or a room full of support people or what have you. And I think that's a huge skill set. And I know from talking to clients that you've worked with, they love that. The executives at those organizations, whether it's private or public, they love the fact that, hey, I can sit down with Raymond and he can help me understand. I don't need to know the ones and zeros on this thing, but I can understand those pieces, and he can communicate that to me. And that communication skill is critical. And I think that's been a massive part of your success, at least the part that I've observed.
I agree. I think there's a level of humility that goes into each conversation. And, again, I said it earlier, I don't know everything, nor do I need to know everything. However, you have to be able to speak to people, and you have to be able to make people feel comfortable, and you have to be able to build alliances, because there are opportunities that are missed, that, somebody has an opportunity to give you information, and them withholding information is not necessarily a fireable offense or something to that nature. However,
right.
If you build the right relationships, I just find that you get information, and you get good, actionable information quicker if you have a relationship with the client or the individual or whomever it is.
As we wrap up here, let me ask you a little bit about your thoughts on the future of technology. What are your best guesses for the future of technology that you can see down the road?
Obviously, I think there's going to be a huge push into robotics. I think the workforce is going to be largely made up of, people who build robots, people who, maintain and service robots, and people who develop concepts for robots. I think the everyday Joe who's working on an assembly line or something like that, I think that position is going to be a lot harder to find in the future. I think, most things are going to move much more towards a technology base. I think, just look at the news, you see all of what's going on around the world in terms of, war and things like that. I think technology is going to be used more for that as well. I think, space. The more we build, the more we're going to build, it's just layer on top of layer. So I think it's hard to say exactly. I think, the automotive industry, I think cars are going to become so much smarter through technology. I think, learning is going to be, improved through technology.
It's amazing. I was telling somebody a couple of weeks ago that it's amazing all the tools and apps and opportunities for education in whatever line of education, professional development, academics, what have you. People learn more off of their phone and Masterclass and TED and YouTube and all this stuff than I ever had access to in the first 40 years of my life. It's really, if you sit down and think about it, it's really mind blowing.
It is.
What's your personal growth, personal development strategy, Raymond? What are some things that you do every day to kind of sharpen the saw?
Well, one of the things that I always do is I replay every conversation, every interaction, and I'm looking for improvement. Sometimes they say, you either win or you learn. Well, I think it's opportunity to do both. Even when you're winning, you should be learning, because you may have come out of it with a win, but at the end of the day, the win could have come sooner.
Mm-hmm.
The win could have been more satisfying. There's just, out of every situation, there's opportunity for growth. And so I try to, when I get off the phone with someone in terms of work, I replay the conversation. Did I give them what they needed? How quickly did I give them what they need? That goes back to my old days. I still have a speed thing here, but I understand the need for making sure that the idea is well fleshed out, or but I do want to give it to you in a way, because the attention span is a lot less these days as well. So I don't need to talk to you for 20 minutes to tell you something that I could have told you in the first 2 minutes.
What are you reading? What do you listen to?
Right now, I'm reading this book called, and it's a golf related book, but it's called Every Shot Counts. And so that kind of as I've gotten deeper into the book, it's also shown me how it ties into my career and business, and essentially the premise of the book is that, one shot is no more important than the other. They all count. You need to give all of them the respect that is required of the shot. It deals with percentages and how you pick the right shot and things like that. And it goes back to business, right? Because there's 1,000 ways to do things, but then there's also more, the bang for your buck, right? Is the juice worth the squeeze, and all of those wonderful terms that people always use. But it's also given me some clarity in regard to maximizing each decision. So, this decision gives me the opportunity to be, 90% closer to my goal versus 40% closer to my goal. When I started reading it, I didn't start with the idea that this was going to help me in my career, but it absolutely makes a lot of sense, and it ties a lot of things together for me.
Excellent. Every shot counts. We'll drop that book notation in the show notes. So as we close up, Raymond, I appreciate you pouring some wisdom and some of your career experience into our listeners today. So thank you for doing that. How can our listeners learn more about you, your work, the kind of things that you're into? Where can they find you on the web or social or what have you?
I'm on all of them. I'm on Instagram. I don't use it, but I'm on there, right? I have kids, so I have to be on there. So I have Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok. Don't ask me. I don't know. I don't have any TikTok videos, but I'm on all of them. And obviously, they can reach out to you. You know how to get in contact with me.
We'll drop your LinkedIn profile into the show notes as well. And Raymond, I so appreciate the opportunity to connect with you this morning and have a good, an old school long conversation. I miss doing that, and I'm so thankful. So thank you for being on the podcast with us today.
Well, Barry, anything for you, and good luck with your podcast. I wish great things for you and Tracy, and take care, my friend.
Thanks for joining us today on the Tech Leaders Talk podcast. Learn more about our show at techleaderstalkpodcast.com and follow us on social media. We are Tech Leaders Talk Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and we're on Twitter at TechLeadersPod. Subscribe to our show wherever you get podcasts, and please share this episode with at least one person in your life who would benefit. Until next time, Tech Leaders, keep talking.